IT.
We did. Sure. Yeah. It was good. There's one of them. Oh. That's right, yeah, they can remind me what day it was.
I didn't think not, but I know my brother was.
No, it's actually months out.
All right, everybody. I call to order the Monday, June 20th meeting of the River Falls Board of Education. This meeting has been properly notified. Are there any visitors or delegations who would like to address the board this evening? Okay.
Hi, my name is Pam Souter. I'm a community member. I came to the Educational Committee meeting the other day, and one of the things I addressed was Rule 871 on, I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's on the materials, I think library materials. And one of the things I'd mentioned was that the change to the 5-year review, and I had asked that potentially that could be something that would, because the verbiage says may not be reconsidered, and I don't know if you're Dr. or Mrs. Myers-Johnson, but you said that it potentially could be reconsidered. I'm just asking two things. One, that that verbiage be put in there so that people know that it can potentially be reconsidered, for one. And then the other thing that I realized after I left, I couldn't have said anything anyhow, but what I'd mentioned was that there are no parents or no community members on the book review committee. And so I am just making that suggestion that potentially the board would consider putting community members and or parents on the book review committee. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate that.
Would anyone else like to address the board this evening? All right.
I got some questions, but you might answer them as you go through here. So maybe wait and see.
Are
Well-
they questions related to topics that are on the agenda?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Give me a little sign
Yeah.
when it's when your topic comes up. But the way that public comment works is we won't be able to have terribly much give and take unless it is something specific on here. But it's we're likely to do more listening than conversation with you. Okay. All right. Then we are going to move on to informational items, and the first one is that we have the school resource officer reports. This is something that we have done regularly. I think COVID got in our way a little bit, like in so many things. But it's a chance for us to be able to hear from our school resource officers and have some insight into what you do in our schools. So, Chris and Brian, the floor is yours.
All right, would you like us both up or just individually?
However you would like to do it.
I'll start out.
All right?
I recently heard some information about, let me adjust this, about public speaking and anxieties and what people stress about. And statistics show that more people actually worry and stress over public speaking than death. So majority of people would rather be dead than talk to you guys right now, but that's not the case with me. Because I feel really comfortable talking about my position because it's a passion of mine. I love the kids. I love what I do, and it does make it easy to talk about in that regards. I know most of you, Mr. Schultz. I don't believe we've met, but nice to meet you, and I'm sure we'll get to know each other better. And I guess my goal here is just so you understand what I do in the schools, and I'm sure I will miss some things, but also understand my philosophy as an officer working in the schools, because I don't think it's like that everywhere you go, and I think it's really important to know where I come from as an officer working in the schools and how I relate to kids and in the whole position. I've been doing this a number of years. I believe it's my 14th year that I've completed in the schools. People ask me if I want to do it, and my answer is wholeheartedly I want to do it. That's why I've been doing it so long. I don't feel burnt out. I feel energized. Officer Jensen and I actually just went to we have 3 different trainings. We're at a school resource officer conference in Appleton last week. We brought a lot of good stuff back, some things I'm excited about with like diversion programs, things like that. This week, school safety is obviously a big thing I'll talk about, but this week we have school crisis response training. All week at Turtle Lake, CISA 11, so we were there earlier, we got back and made it to this meeting, and we'll be there the rest of the week. And then the following week, we have more school-related education, and that's forensic interviewing of children, mostly abuse and neglect cases, working with human services. So continuing education is important for us too, and our department prioritizes that, which I'm happy about. So the philosophy of our police department, when I got hired, there's a contract, and it kind of discusses the school resource officer responsibilities and roles. And they outlined it there's 4 main things we do, and one is a counselor. So we're there to be a counselor, and I'm going to expand on these. And it's kind of in this order, and I take it pretty seriously working in this order. The second one is a referral agent, utilizing resources over the years to help students and families. Third is an educational aid, getting in the classrooms, talking to kids about safety, and I'll discuss some of the things that I do in the schools. And lastly, it's law enforcement agency. And you'll see definitions of school resource officers. I just saw one today earlier, and it had all to do with the traditional law enforcement. It didn't have to do with these other things. And when I'm working, I'm always trying to put those in order. And there's a time and a place for traditional law enforcement. But my feeling, and I know Officer Jensen's feeling, is that it takes a back seat to the other things and helping the kids. And it's a time to make errors and learn from them and grow in put some seeds into them that they're going to, change and make improvements. Sometimes you see them right away. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's years later. It's like watering a seed. You keep on watering it and keep on watering it. And you might not see it coming up right away, but it's growing roots and it's getting stronger. And sometimes you see the results right away. And other times it's years later, but you're putting this good foundation with the kid doing the right thing, so they're going to have an easier future when times are weathered and they're going to be stronger. So some things that I do at the elementary schools. As far as the educational aid, I talk to the students about Halloween safety. I talk to them about bike safety. There's intruder training that we discussed with the kids at a kid-friendly level years ago. We developed, some teachings for them to make it where it's comfortable for them and parents. And I think we've done a really good job with that. And also the staff, the elementary staff and the middle school staff, as far as intruder training and kind of the most updated information and the best, safest responses that we do. School safety is a big issue, obviously, but it's more than just school security, and that's a huge piece of it. But it's a lot of it. It's psychological too. It's students. They should feel safe, and it's a psychological thing, and it's a culture within the schools. I'm a big one at teaching tactics and working with the district, and I know buildings and grounds are always making improvements to security, but it goes beyond that. Even when I'm teaching the staff how to respond and all the safety features we have, we always finish, and it's a priority talking about the culture and reporting and students feeling heard and having those resources for the kids so we don't have an issue in the first place. And that's what you want to do, is you want to head stuff off before it's an issue. And I'm just one piece into that, but I can be part of that culture and part of the training and part of, kids feeling comfortable with me. For the last 4 years, since we've had 2 school resource officers, big difference coming to the elementary schools with their comfort with me, as opposed to when I was the sole school resource officer. I just didn't have the time to get to the elementary schools as much as I do now. And right away, within a year or two, it's like amazing. The kids are running up. When I'm standing in line at drop-off, kids are running up, giving me a hug. That's huge. And all the other parents are lined up seeing this, especially with different cultures, races, and stuff. It's really important. And the amount of parents that come up to myself, and I know Officer Jensen too, and just say we have a lot of kids in the district, and looking in the eye and say, I feel much more comfortable with my kids going to school here with you here, and I know you're making a difference, and it gives them peace of mind that we're in the schools. And I hear that quite a bit, which is really, really important. At the middle school, again, we're out there all the time, and for years, I think, all the free time when there's before school, after school, in between classes, when lunchroom's going on, just socializing with the kids, a little part of you feels like you're not doing a lot. But you stand back and you look at it, and that's when you're developing the relationships. That's when you're goofing off with them. You're putting a lot of deposits and not withdrawals, because when times get shaky and things don't go good, that's when you need that trust. That's when you need them, and you can withdraw a little bit and not empty the bank. So it's important to put that time in and spend the little moments with the kids proactively, getting to know them, build that relationship so they feel comfortable with you. So sometimes it's like I'm hanging out with the kids, or I'm at recess playing kickball with the kids, and I'm getting paid for that, but it pays dividends. I mean, I really believe that. I have to convince myself that sometimes, but I think that's the case. At the middle school, again, there's a lot of time spent with the kids, just like at the elementary schools, doing alcohol and drug classes and a variety of topics. Since I'm there, the majority of my time is spent there, obviously with my office and paperwork and some things that you have to get done. But there's a miscellaneous topics such as sexting, inappropriate internet use. That's been kind of creeping up on the scale. I'm giving it more and more attention because it's needed. And like I said, I'm always looking at ways to be creative and use diversion things. There is a time and a place for traditional law enforcement for tickets or referrals to the county. But I'm doing that it's the best thing for the child or their family. Sometimes they don't have the parents that are going to help them and get the wheels in motion to help that kid. Sometimes there's dysfunction within the houses, so sometimes you have to boost them along. They need it, but they need a push, and sometimes that's the push that gets them there, is some of that traditional law enforcement. So I don't want to be too long-winded, so I'll open up to questions, obviously, too. But my approach is forgiving, passionate, loving toward the kids. It's not emotional. When you're making decisions about things, it's not how you're feeling. It's looking at it more of a philosophy, like what you're trying to do in the best interest of the kids. Always have that in mind, whatever I'm doing in my decision making. And there's some times where I've been asked, "Are you overwhelmed?" And my answer is always no. There's days that are overwhelming, but then the days you have some quieter days too that kind of equal out, which is good. I heard an analogy or a story at training earlier that really hit home with me, and I think it's good for us to remember, not just me, teachers, everybody that has a role in influencing the kids in our school district. But the story was, there's an elderly man that walks the beach every morning because he has a beach house, and this is his routine. One day, he was doing the same as every other day, walking down the beach, but something was a little different on this day. There was a young kid in front of him doing something by the water. And as he approached, he saw a kid throw something in the water, and he got closer and he saw starfish all over the beach because there was a low tide that left all the starfish. And this is about perception. And the gentleman sees the kid and he says, "You're wasting your time. There's hundreds, there's thousands of these starfish." And the kid throws a starfish in the water and says, "But I made a difference to this one." And that's what it's about. And you have to remind yourself when you're dealing with kids in situations that you do make a difference. And every time you have a contact and you're dealing with some kind of issue with the kid or the family, you're making a change with them. And that's what you have to look at. And day in and day out, when you're with the kids, that turns into a whole lot of starfish that you're changing and involving. So I appreciate it. I'm grateful to be here. I still have a couple years left. That's my plans. And I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm not burnt out, so I'm gonna have energy till I retire. So
Wonderful. Chris, I'm going to make one comment and then Brian, and then we'll talk with you. I remember, and I've mentioned this before, that an administrator in this district said that you're actually a teacher who wears a uniform.
Thank you.
I think that sums up. That's lovely.
Thank you.
Brian, and then we'll talk together with all of us.
This is my fourth year doing the school resource officer, so it's really nice to get back to somewhat normalcy. First year was normal, and now the last 2 years have been kind of definitely strange, to say the least. This last year was good to get back into the groove of everything. This is summary. I mean, Officer Chief summed it up quite a bit as far as what we do and how we do things. I'll just explain a little bit of things that I've been working on at the high school level. We did the mock car crash again this year, which is a huge event for the school. It is a student-led event. What it is it basically comes down to is we talk with the students that are part of the SOS program, and we discuss, okay, what kind of message you want to send out to the student body. This year was alcohol related. Last time I did it was, so this is my second year doing it. Last time was texting and driving, but this was more alcohol related event. So my responsibilities regarding that is to get everything involved, right? And get this, got the Wildcat Center reserved, get the Lifelink 3, get the police department, fire department, get Bach Young Funeral Home Services, we get the medical examiner. I mean, you can go on and on. You talk about the lab farm, make sure they're okay to have a helicopter fly over so horses don't get scared. I mean, there's a lot of things involved in it. It takes a lot of effort and stuff like that too. But it was nice this year. We were able to go through the whole thing, and I think the message was sent. I did get a few comments from students thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. This year, the helicopter actually landed, which is awesome. The first year I landed, they had a real medical emergency, so we were unable to land for a mock car crash. So it just amazes me to see all these entities do this for nothing, right? They're just doing it for free because we all have an active role with our community, and we all really like the student, want to be involved with the student body and stuff. So it's just really neat to see everybody involved. New this year, we talking with our health. Katie Bosch is also she's an amazing person too. She's a great teacher, but we talked about the last 2 years during COVID, try to get a program with regarding her lifeguarding class. And so we developed a mock drowning for these lifeguards. So what that entails is that we get a call the ambulance service to have them available and ready on the certain days. And what the students do on that day is they actually do a rescue. They backboard the individual, bring them back up, translate from the student into a mannequin, and do CPR and compressions and everything else like that. Meanwhile, having the ambulances there saying, hey, you're not going deep enough, you have to do this or X, Y, and Z, and give them encouragements while they're doing this, or hey, you're doing a great job, like the rhythm, that type of thing. And so it's really neat to see. I kind of act as the dispatcher, so there, I kind of throw curveballs at them once in a while just to get them thinking, right? It'd be like, oh, we have a drowning at the high school. I said, okay, well, where's the pool? I'm guessing it's at the pool at the high school. They're like, yeah. I said, where's the pool located? Get them thinking. Oh, they have to look around like, oh, it's a door. Look at the door number. Look at figuring things out. You got to remember these things. Is there going to be somebody there to wave us down? Reason why I think it's so important, this actually happened to me when I was younger. So I was lifeguard for many years, and also when I was in college student, we had a medical emergency, and when I called the ambulance that time, they did not have any idea where the campus, where it was located or anything like that. So I sent my buddy, hey, go out there and wave them down, and so that's basically what it came down to. So I remember those things of just myself learning the things, but that was really cool to see. Otherwise, I'm definitely there for all the student bodies, the student kids. I always have an open door policy. I usually have a lot of candy that's kept on my desk, and students just walk in and talk to me about their weekends or how things are going, or if they have some stuff that happened over the weekend that they want to discuss or anything like that. So I usually have my open door policy, or some kids just go in there and take a piece of candy and say, thanks, Officer Jay, and they walk out the door. And I'm like, hey, see ya. So, it's just a good way to, open the door and get them talking to me and that type of thing. So, and I do enjoy what I'm doing a lot, and I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't, if I didn't enjoy it. We are, like Officer G had mentioned, we do a lot of, we are doing continuing education as well. So a lot of training ahead of us. And we just found out today we have 6 hours training before we go to the next class. So like, holy cow, when are we going to find time to do that? So I guess that's what we'll be doing over the weekend. So, but it is what it is. And we're having I think it's really cool to have this time and be able to be part of the school district as be part of the school district and be a more positive role and be able to, help kids before they get into that different circumstances. Another thing too is like, I always try to take the active role as a educator first, right? So we've had I'm going to be honest with you, we've had several accidents at the high school. Throughout the year, we've had, vehicle bump into another vehicle in the parking lot because let's face it, we have a lot of young drivers out there. With our new camera system, before it was rotating back and forth, we probably, I don't know, Officer G, what do you say? But we didn't solve many of those crimes because the camera would always be moving. Now we have fixed camera system, works great. I've solved every single one of them that came in. And I take that as a learning for these. We're not going to write them for hit and run or anything, but this is something that I can educate them. What do you do when you hit a vehicle? What you should be doing? What are the steps taken appropriately? So, I take that role as well and try to educate these kids as well. So, for sure. You got questions for us too, or?
Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation and for the work that you do. It clearly is the fact that there are a variety of models for having a school resource officer, and I really appreciate the commitment to relationships and to preventing problems. My guess is that we will never know the seeds that you plant or the issues that you prevent. Those are very important things. So I think it's also important to make sure that people understand that this program is a collaboration between the school district and the City of River Falls Police Department. So it's a great way that our community works together to keep kids safe, to support kids, to help them learn and grow. So thank you to both of you. This is very important work.
No, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, other questions or comments from other board members? Todd?
I have a question. When you go to the training with other resource officers through CISA or wherever, what are other districts doing? Are you seeing numbers added beyond existing? Are they holding steady? Do you see a reduction? I'd just be curious more than anything.
The school resource
Are districts adding resource officers holding steady, or do you see some declining? I'd just be curious to know.
What I've seen in our area is holding steady.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of what I've seen. I haven't seen, especially with some of the things that have happened nationally. Some of the pullbacks from SROs we have not seen in this area.
Okay.
And I know some of the areas that were there started to put it back now because they're having, quite a bit more issues, and that's a little more urban areas. But
Sure.
yeah, I haven't seen
But
one
you're
way or
not,
another.
my guess, I think, would have been holding steady. I just was curious if, there's some competing forces. Some people have reached out saying, why don't we have an officer in each school? And then there's others where you hear about the districts that are eliminating the presence altogether. And so I just was curious what the trend has been around here.
That's what I've seen around here. Yeah.
Anyone else? I love that the kids are happy to see you. And I would never think that it's not working if you're playing kickball or whatever, being in the pool or whatever it is that you're doing. Sometimes those are the most important things we do when we're with kids.
Them are the things we need to remember and hold on to, and because those are the things that really inspire you to keep on doing what you're doing when you see the love of the kids toward you and the respect, and they want you in the building. So
And the things that they will carry with them too.
yeah.
So,
And being 4 years involved in it, I mean, this is the first time I've seen the freshman class go from,
that's
freshmen
right.
to seniors. And as after graduation, how many groups of students come up to you and say, "Hey, Officer Jake, can we get a picture with you?" So that, you made somewhat of a difference there. Otherwise they wouldn't even ask for your picture, right? So I had probably 5 different groups of about anywhere from 5 to 8 students come up there and say, "Hey, let's get all group pictures." So it was really fun to see, and I was happy to take part of that for sure.
well, you have to be pretty welcoming if kids will come to your office, candy or no candy. I mean, still. So, thank you very much. And thanks for doing the continuing education. That's
you bet.
that's how we all stay up on what we need to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. We are now going to move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Benson.
Well, as you all know, we are wrapping up. We have concluded our 2021-22 school year, and so we just wanted to give a little shout out and say thanks to our staff, to our parents, to our students. Parents, they put a lot of trust in us, and they're patient, and they are supportive, and they collaborate and support and help us, and we certainly want to recognize that and, go on record of saying we had another successful year, and we do recognize and appreciate the parental support. Students, amazing year. A lot of things to celebrate this year, just from the standpoint of obviously our primary mission with academic success and learning, but also the number of character awards that our students received this year. Our staff received prominent kind of national recognition and state awards for character education. The success of our co-curricular programming, in addition to the academics and the core learning that takes place. But holy man, we had some success stories this year. We had another marching band state championship group. We had forensics again. I think it was was it not a three-peat, but a four-peat for state championship in forensics, and all of the individual and team success in our athletic programs. Just a great deal of not only academic learning, but the experiences that those kids are going to take with them for a lifetime. Lots to celebrate. And so just wanted to kind of recognize that symbolic end of the year, and we're into the summer months. We've started with summer school, and we got kids club going on, and we're alive and well as the summer moves forward. But we had a great school year. We're going to take that as kind of a segue to where do we go from here now. The next item on our agenda with the strategic plan. We had a strategic plan in place from 2015 to 20, and we had a little void in developing our new plan until here tonight. We're asking the board to approve this new 5-year strategic plan. Thank you, Amanda's pulling pieces of that plan up here on the screen. 5-year plan, so 22 through 27. there's some really important pieces, and how this was put together in a strategic manner was through a number of different approaches. We held 3 public listening sessions in March. We conducted surveys with students, with staff, and with the community also around that same time frame here this spring. Took those results and developed some themes, some common themes that came from those survey results, as well as some of the ongoing things, obviously, that we have in place and things that we know that we need to build upon. And so tonight, our board, again, later on our agenda, we're going to ask you to approve this. We put the item on as an informational item first, and then later you will be asked to approve. But, you know, strategic plans, they can sit on a shelf and collect dust, and they can come out of the gate on a night like tonight and appear to be a path moving forward. But if you don't really follow through, nothing seems to happen. They're just that. They're a document that sits on the shelf. And so as I say that, I reference briefly to past success of previous strategic plans, not only in 2015 to 20, but we also had a strategic plan the 5 years prior to that. And as recognition that things happen when you think strategically, and things happen when you engage the community, staff, and students in providing a voice into the direction that we see ourselves headed into the future with education here in River Falls. And so we have accomplished much from a community education, adult education program in this district was a result of strategic planning, a kids club program in this district. Obvious academic improvements with science, technology, engineering, and math. Our high school CTE department under Mr. Litzke's leadership and the things that they've advanced with the curriculum program offerings, partnerships with CVTC and the university, allowing students to have dual credit and vocational trade opportunities prior to exiting the high school, getting a jump start on college and career readiness. Other systemic activities that have resulted from our previous strategic plans, we know will hold true with this strategic plan as well. And so it's a partnership. Again, the partnership started by purposefully asking opinions from others to help forge the vision for our future with this strategic plan. I mentioned the process that we used, a couple surveys and listening sessions. So basically, as we developed these themes from that feedback, we developed the strategic plan around a framework that has 5 kind of big picture goal areas, and we break that down into some other pieces. But before I ask that you take a look at that, before we get to that, it's important that we start with the mission, vision, and values. And if I could please draw your attention, you have a copy there in front of you, or it's on the screen. Our district previously had a mission statement, and it was a good one, and took us places. We had to remind ourselves of that mission as we make decisions moving forward, policy decisions, budget decisions, staffing decisions. We've added now a new mission statement. I won't read it for you. We included, in addition to that, a vision statement. Vision taking us a little more looking into not just here today, but a vision towards the future as well. Those two kind of work hand in hand, the mission and the vision. And then also we've added, similar to past strategic plans in the district, where we have developed district philosophy and belief statements. The board will be asked moving forward to review, and will be revising 2 board policies, policy 110 and 111, that speak about our existing belief statements, but also our district mission. And so we'll go back to those policies if, I'm assuming you will approve this new strategic plan, and we're going to revisit those 2 policies, 110 and 111. But the values section is a big deal, and these are values that are reflected through the voices of our community and our board and our staff, and we're proud of those value statements. Again, I don't need to read those for you, but these are kind of like guiding principles. These are non-negotiables. These are things that we say we believe so strongly that this is how we're going to conduct ourselves as we go about doing the right thing for our kids in our school district. These are the principles. These are the values that we will move forward in this district. And so I just wanted to really put an emphasis on the mission, vision, and values and how important they are as kind of the first phase, the first part of this new strategic plan. After that comes those 5 goal areas, and then we break it down into some specific actionable steps and some clear objectives that we will strive towards over this next 5-year period. And with that, I'll just add that it's a 5-year plan. It's not a 1-year plan. We're not going to get this done in a year. If we tried to tackle everything in 1 year, we could maybe do things good, but good is not good enough. We want to do things excellent. And so our administrative team then takes this plan, assuming again that you will approve it tonight. We go back to the drawing board. Frankly, right away tomorrow morning, we're going to have conversation on this with our administrative team, and we're going to begin to prioritize these 5 goal areas and those objectives, those action steps that are listed underneath to determine the exact direction that we'll head within this 5-year plan in the coming year, so that we don't try to bite off more than we can chew and try to take too many things on at the same time and do okay or good, but that we can do excellent. And that's why it's a 5-year plan, not a 1-year plan or a 2-year plan. It's going to take time for us to do all of this. You'll notice some of these things will integrate themselves with each other, even though they may be listed as standalone, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. There are other areas in the plan where they're going to cross paths. They're going to interrelate and correlate to each other. And so there's a challenge there for us as well to carry out this mission, vision, and values in implementing those specific goal areas as we progress. So I know the board has seen drafts of this leading up to tonight. And again, I didn't think it was necessary for me to go through and read verbatim each word in this plan. But at this time, I would lastly just point out one of the things that I probably like the best about putting things on paper in this particular strategic plan, putting it on paper. There is a summary on 1 page. It's not a book of 637 pages that you have to wade through to try to understand. So what's the mission, vision, and what are your values, and what kind of things are you going to specifically address and move forward, and what are the goals and the objectives and action steps that you're going to take in this district moving forward? You don't have to go through a 163-page manual to figure it out. It's defined on 1 page. And here we break down some background information. We provide a little more detail. But Amanda, if you could go to that page that I'm referring to, you probably may, is it not going to fit on the screen, the entire 1-pager? Not really, but you get my point. So moving forward then, the board's challenge will be with this strategic plan, similar to previous strategic plans, aligning decisions that you will be faced with moving forward and some of the challenges that you will have, whether it's policy, governance, staffing, budget, moving this district forward. The board, there will be times when we will bring administrative recommendations to you, and we hope that and know that you will align your decisions with this strategic plan.
Thank you, Jamie. This is the board's chance to have conversation, ask questions of Jamie. Bob?
Couple things. With respect to the goals, you have 1.1, 1.2, and so on like that. Have you established the measurements yet, or that's still in the process as far as how do you know what? Yeah, that's good. That's a great question, and something that we need to hold ourselves accountable. And so, to be very honest, I would say some of these are written in a way that just by reading them, you can see, oh, that one will be measurable. And some you may say, well, that's a little more nebulous, maybe not quite specific, easily identified as a way to measure. And so admittedly, yes, we have to kind of work through that with our administration. But I would agree with you that if we're going to hold ourselves accountable to this, and if it's not going to be a document that sits on a shelf and collects dust, then hold yourself accountable and measure what you treasure.
Second thing I had was, what, do we have any frequency as far as update to the board as to how we are on all these? I mean, is it gonna be semi-annually, quarterly, annually, that type of thing?
Historically, and again, I guess that was the thinking with this, would be that there would be for sure a formal annual update. But again, I think that you as a board, I know you as a board will be faced with decisions and challenges. And I think part of what we all should try to remind ourselves of when you are asked to make a decision or faced with a challenge would be to say, well, how does that align with our mission, vision, and values? How does that align with our strategic plan? And if it's out in left field, it might take less time to talk about. If you can find the direct relationship here, then it might be an easier conversation to be had. And so my direct answer is a formal annual. Obviously, more often than that, if the board would like. And then lastly, to repeat myself, I think you're going to be faced with some of those decisions and reminders, if you will, throughout the work that the board does on a monthly basis.
Other questions or comments?
I was going to ask the same question Bob just asked about since I've been on the board in, I don't know, it was September, October of 2019, we were right at the tail end of that last one, and then COVID came along, and we haven't really been in the strategic planning process as much. So I just didn't know what to expect from the follow-up piece of it. But it sounds like, I mean, I know it'd be ongoing for some of these. They're already kind of in discussion, but that was my biggest question.
There's some school of thought in the business world. I know it's pretty common practice when you go through a process like this in developing. Often a measure is on a 90-day kind of a cycle, and I think we want to hold ourselves accountable as a district, and we want to be public about that, and we owe that to the community to give them our scorecard and keep them updated. And so when I say that we'll give a formal, more in-depth annual report, I would also acknowledge there's more room for conversation if we want to do, I don't know about a 90-day in a school setting with the school cycle, the way that our business is run with when students are here and staff and so on. But I would leave the door open for more conversation if the board would like to hear a more frequent, formal update. We certainly can talk about ways to go about doing that as well. We have more work ahead to make this all come to life and to make it happen, for sure.
Can I ask you too, Jamie? I assume that somebody will be able to find this on the website.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll hit them in the face at some point if they were looking for that information.
Yes, we'll work with our communications director and make sure that we get this out publicly. We're going to have nicer, cleaner, printed copies available, but we're going to also obviously have it on our website and send it out on Facebook, put a link out there and kind of kick it out and advertise that we're excited about this and share with people that we appreciate all of their feedback and input in helping to pull this thing together. And yeah, it's important. And then to do some follow-up and say, and here's where we're at a few months down the road.
I think it's also important for board members to remember that our job is not only going to be to monitor progress, but our job will be to ask questions of the work that we are doing based upon how they help us to achieve these goals. So that's important. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate the work that, Jamie, that you and Dave have done on this. I think that the mission, vision, and values represent our community very well. And I think that the values in, those 8 things epitomize what we are trying to do and to be, what our values are. So I think it does a good job of articulating those things. So thank you. Is there anything else? This is just discussion. We're going to come and approve it later on in the agenda. Todd?
This is more a comment than anything. I guess the listening session and survey information that I was part of and saw, I think is fairly well captured, going back to a lot of the comments that were made. And I did talk with Jamie a little bit when those happened, and you said it was fairly similar conversation in all of the sessions. And so I guess I feel pretty comfortable that we've captured a lot of the information that was covered in there too, so.
Yeah, it's not, I don't know, is hyperbole the right word, or I'll just say it's not lip service when I say that we literally did our very best to identify themes, including the old-fashioned get out 12 different highlighter colors from all of the notes that Amanda typed up from listening sessions, to doing the same thing on those surveys, identifying themes, and then pulling that all together. And I'm very pleased and proud with the format of how this looks, but I'm more proud of the fact that I truly believe that we had other voices involved in the development of it. This isn't a Jamie Benson strategic plan. This is a community, staff, board, administrative, lots of eyes and ears and hands were involved in this. It's a true vision, I think, that takes us on the right path over the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. We will be coming back to that, everybody, but right now we will move on to an EID committee update. So, Nate and Dave, I think you're up.
Smiling because I purposely changed so that we would match tonight.
I've had this on all day. That's exciting. They don't really care. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. David Bell, Director of Human Resources and Leadership Development, and co-chair of the EID Committee since 2017.
And I'm Nate Wells. I'm the principal at the Montessori School and 4K administrator, and same timeline as Dave with the EID Committee.
We do have a couple other members of the EID Committee here, whether it's administrators or community members, so we appreciate their attendance. I don't know if you specifically came for tonight, but we're glad you're here, Pam, so we appreciate that. So really twofold tonight. One is to address the areas of focus for the EID Committee, and then talk a little bit about how equity is a thing that is incorporated in a lot of district functions. A statement that is often used is we want to make sure that we're making decisions with the lens of equity and making sure that important things are considered when we make those decisions. So the first part of the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about the committee and the focus that they've had for this year, since this is the kind of annual update for that. And then the second part, we'll talk a little bit more broad district perspective of equity. So the first thing is for 21-22, like I said before, the Equity Committee actually had its birth, I guess you could say, in the last strategic plan around 2016. There was recognition of that, and over the last 5 years, the committee has evolved and taken different missions and visions and values. And one thing that came in really important at the beginning of this year was for our committee to really focus in and hone in on our mission, vision, and values. In 2017, the committee was made up primarily of employees, but we made a specific effort in 2020 and into 2021 to expand our committee to include community members. And as that happened, our committee grew, and it became very large, and we wanted to make sure the work was focused, so that's why we did this mission, vision, values work. The other piece that's always been important for EID is to really identify some goals for the year that are student focused. And the two that we looked at this year were identifying barriers to student participation in co-curricular activities. We'll share a little bit of data as to why that became something that was important for the EID committee work. And then share this research with school and community leaders. So with you as the board, with the activities department, as well as community organizations that support extracurricular activities, whether it's youth sports organizations or other youth organizations. So that was the first goal. And the second goal was to look at more qualitative data, do a little research on qualitative data from students from underserved and underrepresented identities. So we can increase our awareness of the issues related to inclusion and belonging and bring recommendations to the board to proactively address those. So in other words, surveys are fantastic. Nate and I both love a good survey where we can color code things and really identify, parse out things quantitatively. But there's a recognition that doesn't maybe tell the entire story, and we maybe need to do something to provide a voice for our students and families that come from these populations and do it in an inclusive way. So that we can proactively address some of those issues. So we made some progress on those, and Nate's going to take a little bit of time to talk about the first one. Oh, the mission and vision. You okay doing that, or do you want me to?
You're on a roll.
Okay, thanks. So mission and vision, before we get into the subcommittee work. So the mission, it was really important for the district mission to be embedded in the EID committee's mission. And so in other words, we're not some outside entity, we're aligned to that. And so the group, through multiple activities and facilitation, arrived at this mission. We're engaging multiple community perspectives in order to help create a safe, welcoming, and academically engaging environment for all students by looking at student and community access and engagement data so we can address issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity in our schools. And so our vision then is that we become a convening body, a voice that will serve River Falls School District by engaging community and school stakeholders in research, learning, and discussion that will lead to recommendations to administration and the school board to build a more inclusive and welcoming River Falls School District. So one thing that's embedded in that is it's not the vision of the EID committee to go out and do this work. It's to do the research behind this work and make recommendations to the school board and other community partners to build a more inclusive River Falls School District. And the values that we had is that was really important that we were student focused and community focused. So we're rooted in improving the conditions required for all of our students to feel safe, welcome, and engaged in our school. And by data analysis, we can identify some areas where that's not taking place. And then we can work through civil discourse and being a welcoming host to provide recommendations for that, to improve.
And I think just to add a little bit to that, I mean, the piece of going through the mission, vision, and values was to really solidify. We wanted to make sure that we were looking at our student population, looking at data from what our students are telling us, and we wanted to have kind of a clear way forward. And so the whole mission, vision, values within equity work, they talk about not one group can do everything, and so this was really about narrowing down what the purpose of this group was. So hopefully that focus comes through in some of the things that we talk about next. So the subcommittee that I worked directly with quite a bit, Pam behind me was there every day, even days where we didn't have it. And our goal was to look at what we did know from previous school perceptions data was that there was disconnectedness from certain populations, those being Black and African American, special education, and students on free and reduced lunch, which would be also low socioeconomic class. And so what's nice about school perceptions is it brings a very quantitative approach to it. You can look at the numbers. And so we identified 2 questions within school perceptions this last time it was administered in the spring to look at what our students were telling us. So that's what we're looking at here. And school perceptions is extremely large, and you can dice up the numbers in a lot of different ways. And so what's before you now is this idea that the question was asked, I participate in one or more clubs, so looking for participation. Informally, we've talked as a district, I've talked with David Cradle, we've talked as an admin, and the idea is you'd like to have kids participate in at least one co-curricular activity, whether that be chess club or a sport or band or those sorts of things. So when looking at, this Likert scale, sometimes you cut it down the middle and you say, always and usual are positive, sometimes and never are the things we need to work on. For this, we solely focused on looking at those students that reported out a never on it. And so one thing to pull away from this, and I kind of highlighted the demographics, so out of the 95 Hispanic students, nearly 18% reported that they aren't active in a co-curricular. 37% of Black and African American. Then you also see some discrepancies with the non-special education students and the free and reduced. And it's important to know that the numbers themselves don't tell the whole story, as that's part of what the qualitative work that we need to do, that we did and will do. But so for example, the Hispanic 17.6, if you look further into school perceptions data and look at how they spend a lot of their extra time, a lot of the students reported out things revolving around family and those sorts of things, as opposed to some other demographics that reported out about video games and TV. And so I just want to put that disclaimer out there that just because these numbers are skewed, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Also adding that perhaps the students' understanding of what a co-curricular is could be limited to sports. So there's some things to weed out in the future when we re-administer this. But so that's one thing. The second piece was, of the activities that are offered, what is your interest in it? And so once again, focusing on the never column. And for the most part, so I highlighted the Hispanic and Black and African American populations simply, and I probably could have done free and reduced, but a lot of the nevers with the interests came in around that 4, these are all percentages, 4% or lower, so anything that was significantly higher than that 4 mark I highlighted. So that's saying that out of the 20 Black students that identify as Black and African American, 21% of them said there's nothing that's offered to them. I also want to note that there's the column of the 2 or more, and so we do have more students of color than 20 in our district, but quite often students are self-identifying their identity, so you might actually have more students of color within that 2 or more column. So the data looks clean, but it's ultimately not.
Is this high school only or middle?
For grades 4 to 12. So that's the school perceptions. The second thing, and this is what the subcommittee spent a lot of time on, was developing a survey for parents, grades 6 through 12, to try to get their perception of what are potential barriers that they or their students face when trying to get involved in co-curriculars. And we actually partnered with a lot of different community organizations ranging from the football, youth football, to youth baseball, to the gymnastics. So we partnered with them this idea that eventually, which our next steps will be, how do we remove these barriers? We can include those folks in it. But these were themes that came out from it. So our subcommittee group sat down with the data and highlighted and tried to come together with what barriers there were. And some of them, I mean, oddly enough, line up with what we heard about in our listening sessions. The communication piece is parents missing deadlines, things like that. The integration piece, I'll just comment on, that was the idea that a lot of the people who responded, a lot of the parents that responded talked about, is there a way to bring the district's co-curriculars and the community's co-curriculars together and capitalize on some of the strengths that each have. So those were barriers that were found. So that was the work of one subcommittee meeting once a month, and the other is subcommittee 2.
So one thing with subcommittee 2 is that we didn't want it to be Nate and I leading every one. So this subcommittee was led by Charlie Yang. Charlie is a 8th grade English language arts teacher, and he did a really nice job So anyways, this group was around gathering qualitative data, looking at that student experience. And so a lot of time was spent with this group was kind of zeroing in on how we would find those students and doing it in an appropriate way. And so we landed on, we're just going to ask, and we're going to ask everyone. And so we didn't want to leave anybody out. We didn't want to target a specific group. We wanted to just ask if you felt underrepresented or underserved, we want to have an opportunity to have a conversation with you. We wanted to develop the how. How are we going to get at that, and how are we going to do it so the people who are providing that information feel that their identities are protected, that we feel like it's not going to be an inside job because some guy from central office is going to be doing the interviews. So we talked a lot about developing confidentiality agreements, making sure that parents and families were aware of participation and felt comfortable with that. And so that outreach piece, the time that it took to get that, it means that we will start this outreach in the fall of 2022. We spent a lot of time on the questions we want to ask. And remember, these aren't Likert scale questions. We're looking more for student experiences. So we want a skilled interviewer who is able to ask these questions in a way that can give us maybe a deeper understanding of underrepresented and underserved students' experiences within our school district to help us better be informed. And so these are the questions that took place. Charlie did a really good job of actually asking students that, what type of questions should we be asking? He took that feedback and brought these together, and we landed on this. One important part I kind of touched on was this idea of having an outside entity be providing these interviews. And so the next step before we can really move this forward is to find out who that community partner would be. Dr. Nate Sherman, who's the principal at Greenwood, has experience. This was his doctorate study, was in this qualitative analysis. And so he provided a lot of documentation on A, how this questioning should happen, as well as B, the agreements that need to be in place, the confidentiality things that should be in place to make sure that we're protecting the identities of the students. Because the idea is you wouldn't want anything traced back to a specific student. The idea is that we're collecting this qualitative data in a way that protects that, gives them voice, but protects their identity. So with that in mind, we've reached out to UWRF. It seems like a real natural community partner, especially in specific areas of graduate study. And we're hopeful that we could land on at least one or maybe multiple UWRF grad students to help us with this project. The target date would be to start that in the fall when students are back. So this will end up being a 2-year goal for the EID committee. So I'll stop there before we kind of move to the district piece. Are there questions from the board on the work of the EID committee?
I'm curious just about a very particular piece. When you asked them what made them feel, or if they felt underrepresented, do you feel underrepresented or underserved? Did you ask them what any?
We spent a lot of time on that, right? Like the idea of like, do we want, and I think and they were probably still too wordy, but the idea was if it's too wordy in an announcement or an outreach, even if it's they're going to be like, what, even underrepresented, underserved, just we want to make sure students, we catch their ear with what it is, and we don't do it in a way that almost turns them off to it, if that makes sense. And so we thought if we got too deep into it or too much of an explanation, then we might pull back. So we spent at least one meeting on that point. But if you have feedback, we'd definitely take it.
I don't have a specific feedback. I was just curious. That seems like a tricky landscape, right, to figure out. I'm also curious if there are any particular groups of students that maybe we don't identify as underserved or underrepresented, but they identify as students.
Right, and I think that's part of why we didn't want to have like a targeted approach to this. Yeah. I think we had some good feedback within the group to say sometimes that perception of underrepresented and underserved is an important thing to consider. And if we can get them in and allow them to give that feedback, that might be teased out in the questioning in a better way than we could with the perception survey or something like that.
Sure.
So just so I'm clear, these are questions that a fourth grader is going to be answering?
No, this group would be targeted to 6 through 12. And it would be in an interview format, so it's not like they're going to have to like write through it. There would be an interviewer who would be pulling out.
High level for a sixth grader.
Yep.
What does it mean to be underserved? Or
You bet.
That's the nice thing about having them self-identify, right? Because if a sixth grader doesn't identify as underserved or underrepresented, they won't be part of this. So it'd be a student that
Yep.
maybe feels like they've had that experience. Mike, the 412 is the co-curricular part.
412 is all school perception surveys. 412. Yep. And those questions are a little more objective.
And Dave, are we gonna interview every child?
No.
We're not targeting,
Nope.
you're taking a sample.
So, no, we're gonna offer the opportunity, and then, but we're not anticipating that we're gonna get 1,000 kids to take us up on that. And we hope that they maybe all don't feel that either.
Yep, go ahead. No, one more question on the subcommittee, number 1, identifying barriers to student participation. Did you separate by gender at all?
That data is available, but we didn't look at that. I don't think you disaggregated it out.
I looked at it, but there wasn't any significant difference between gender.
Even in the subgroups, there wasn't a significant difference? Interesting. Thanks.
I have one comment. One thing that strikes me, especially with the sixth graders, I'm going to pick up on what Mike said. I imagine it would be entirely possible for a sixth grader to actually be underserved, but not to be able to articulate what
Yep.
that experience is all
Yep.
about. And so I hope the researchers are going to have to, we're going to have to be keeping track of a variety of things in qualitative research.
As underserved because they don't want to become a target or become a, sort of feel different than their coach.
Yeah.
Their
students, their
right?
classmates,
I mean,
yeah. Or the other thing we talked about too is, maybe as they get a little bit older, feeling like, well, nothing's going to change, that type of thing. So I think that's kind of why we wanted that a little bit of an outside entity to help us with that, to maybe lend some credibility to it. But yeah, that's definitely another thing that we talked about is how are we going to find the students that we want to hear from and amplify that voice.
Yeah, I would anticipate.
Yep.
I would anticipate it's going to be challenging for us to get big numbers of participants, but I would also suggest that we would be remiss to not ask them. Yeah, ask, just to, without it being a selected response survey. Click on A, B, C, or D as for the reasons why you're not engaged in some of these activities. Or on a scale of 1 to 12, tell me why you're not. Let's just have a conversation about it. That's why this is more of a, qualitative information gathering that we're going to attempt to get the opinions and the experiences from people. I don't mean to be a pessimist, but I just think it's going to be challenging for us to get big numbers to participate, but we would be remiss to not try.
I don't have a problem. I think we do need participation. My only thing would be is that if I identified as being underserved and I had the initiative, I would probably want to talk to a person. But are the results going to be weighted, or we're going to get adverse selection where we'll have more kids saying, I'm underserved, that type of thing? And if we extrapolate across the student population, are we going to have a higher reporting number as underserved than really exists?
Yeah, I think the purpose of this committee and this process is not specifically to extrapolate over large populations. I think it's an opportunity. So one thing when we're talking about inequity work is that the importance of voices being heard. And although you might only hear from a handful of voices, 12, when those stories are told, it resonates with others who have those same experiences. And it's hard to, when looking at something like school perceptions, I think a pitfall that you can find in equity work is that you look at a population, you look at a number, and then you start making up solutions for them without understanding what that population wants. This is just like a deeper look into it to say these things exist in this quantitative way, but qualitatively, hear what students are telling us. And the idea, a lot of the conversation around underserved and underrepresented was when we use something like traditionally marginalized, if you do know what that is, there are people that even fall outside of that. And so that was the power of having community members on the committees, because they brought up good points like, you know, I don't fall into a traditionally marginalized group, but I just had an awful experience because I was picked on because of I like Dungeons and Dragons, you know, with those things. So the idea is being able to tease those folks out too, so they have a voice also.
Would you just go back on the slide and put the questions up there again? I'm going to ask I don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering, especially for some of those sixth graders, what would happen if we had a conversation in TA about, do you feel safe at school? What is it like to feel safe at school? How do you know when you feel safe at school? I wonder if what kind of information we would get and how that would, you know, be some responses for us. It would certainly be analyzed differently in qualitative data, but it might be at least something to consider. I'm thinking some of those sixth graders are pretty little kids.
Yeah, and you know, we've hemmed and hawed a lot on that middle school group if they're prepared for it, and I think we were sensitive too to like what you said, the idea of a teacher getting into these deep conversations in that environment when they're also trying to build community and those types of things, and trying to preserve that relationship in the NTA, and maybe not, you know, this isn't a first day activity for sixth grade, I don't think, that type of thing. So, but yeah, and maybe there's other ways we can feed that in, and that's something that we can bring back to the committee, is just the idea of, you know, where are we at with, you know, the bottom of this? How could we find other ways to maybe find some of that information that's maybe not part of the bigger project that this group is focusing on? I think that's good feedback.
Especially in qualitative data, one of the things that you want to do is to try to get the data from a variety of sources and see how it matches up. So it'd be interesting to know if in a group we had similar responses compared to when we interviewed children individually. It might be interesting.
And to be honest, we're kind of building the boat as we go, right? Like, we've never done this before in this setting, and you know, it would be a good problem to have 100 kids that want to say something, and then it'll be that subcommittee's job to figure out how do you vet through those things. So.
And one thing Pam just wanted me to point out with subcommittee 1 was the idea that we had the first survey that Nate highlighted was school perceptions, which was a student survey. The second thing, where we didn't show you the raw data, but that's the disaggregated data, had both sort of closed questions where they answered, but they also had, parents also had a chance to give kind of open-ended responses too. So we had, again, try to get multiple sources to draw our conclusions from. So sort of next steps then for the committee as we look to next year, 22-23, is to really, to what Nate talked about, convene appropriate community groups to move into the solution phase of the subcommittee number 1. There's already some action steps, some really easy, quick action steps that we can take as a board that are already kind of being moved forward as far as identifying what are some co-curricular activities, what are some schools, specifically the Renaissance Charter Academy, that doesn't have as many unique opportunities there for co-curriculars, and then also where do we have some of our lowest participation rates. And so maybe there's some things we can do, and we're already trying to do as soon as 22-23. But there's also some bigger picture sort of systemic things that need to take place there, and that is some community engagement piece there. We talked a lot about this idea of partnering to do what we have as a vision for that student experience interviews. We really need a partner, and so until we have that partner, we're a little bit in a treading water phase with that. And then the other piece then is EID committee engagement. So in the life cycle of the EID committee, we started as a small employee group. We expanded to a very large committee group structure, almost too big. So then we broke down into where portions of the committee were only coming to certain subcommittee meetings. And so now we've kind of got maybe down to a size of more action-orientated group where we have consistent attendance, which is good. But I think the thing that we want to make sure we maintain is appropriate school and community representation. So if all of the school employees drop off except for Nate and I, because we're contractually obligated to be there, and it's just community, then that's out of sync, right? And if no longer the community feels like their voice is being heard, and it's just employees, that's problematic. We also want to make sure that buildings are represented, because that's the other big piece with this, is there is voice back to the buildings. And so we've got great representation in certain buildings and maybe not quite as good in others. And so we wanted to find ways to get that representation balanced. And then we tried a little bit this year, but kind of distributed leadership, so that it doesn't feel as though there's only one or two people who can really do action on this, but we've got we're empowering our employees to do some things, and instead of maybe dictating it, we're just in that support role. So that's kind of where we're at as a committee. All right, so kind of a bigger picture is just EID integration into our district. And so we just highlighted three areas in which equity-based decisions can be impactful. One is in professional development. In this year, building awareness around underrepresented and underserved populations, giving training to our employees around unique issues for these groups is really important. An example is LGBTQ. We don't get into the politics of LGBTQ, but we do recognize that our students in that group have some very specific issues and needs around mental health, around bullying, around support services, and we want to make sure that our employees are aware of that. Culturally responsive practices, helping our teachers become more comfortable engaging in those decisions, engaging in those practices and actively understanding that and becoming more comfortable, has guided some of our professional development decisions over the past year. This group is very clear on policy, and the conversations we've had around policy and making sure that we are considering diverse viewpoints when we talk about controversial topics or procedures for handling complaints about instructional library materials or dress code and media selection. All those things have bubbled to the top, and we've really used the idea of diverse viewpoints to kind of arrive at what that policy will look like. Another example is the strategic plan adoption. So the district values that Jamie talked about were really informed by our EID non-negotiables. That's a discussion that we talked about a lot over the last couple of years. And really, how do we put those things together so that equity is part of what we're talking about? But it isn't over here as its own separate issue. It's embedded and aligned to what we do as a district. And so looking forward, our areas of growth is that consistent training piece around things like recognizing bias in the school, understanding our own cultural lens, promoting respect for student differences, and collaborating with families. Our educators are telling us through feedback that they want to become more comfortable with that, and to be more comfortable, we need to engage and lean into some of those conversations. Confronting and investigating allegations of bias, racism, and discrimination, making sure our systems are very consistent and tight for that, whether it's the way that we collect those reports or how we process them. And then addressing equity in the EID themes in the curriculum and really focusing on drawing on student identities and experience to shape curriculum and instruction, making sure that we're giving those opportunities, and then also cultivating that appreciation for our diverse world and diverse viewpoints. I hogged it. Anything else?
I've got nothing more to say.
Any questions or comments?
That's not true, Nate.
Yeah.
I've never, ever seen that where Nate doesn't have something more to say. Oh, sorry. This is going to be so interesting to hear from students. And sometimes when you hear from students, the different perspectives that you get are things that adults don't even think of. That is going to be fascinating. The other thing that would be interesting about this is to know if there's a cultural difference in how much families value participation in co-curriculars. I think we value it, and that's why we're researching it, right, studying it. But that would be an interesting piece to me too, because if you don't value it, you're not going to make some of the sacrifices, right, that it takes for your kids to participate.
And I don't think we ever stated our goal is to have every kid to participate, because clearly there's lots of different factors that influence that. To your point, one is just there's nothing there. I'm not upset about it, but it's just not how I want to spend my time. So.
It's interesting. This is really good work.
Thank you. I know that you've emphasized shared leadership. I also know that the two of you have done some very important work and leadership on this, so thank you to both of you. All right, now, after an hour and 17 minutes, we are going to begin our action items. So at this point, we have meeting minutes from May 16, the regular Board of Education meeting. We have bills that have been submitted for payment. We also have employment recommendations. So at this point, is there a motion to approve minutes, bills, and employment as presented?
So moved.
All right, Cindy moved, and who is seconding? Mike. All right. Questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? The motion is carried, and there are 5 of us. Okay. All right, we are going to move on to B. Jamie has presented to us the proposed 5-year strategic plan, and at this point, I would like to have a motion to approve the new 2022-2027 district strategic plan. Is there a motion? Thank you, Todd.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bob. Questions or comments? We had some good conversation earlier. Is there anything left?
Not for me. No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the motion is carried. All right, I am going to give the report on the Educational Program Committee. So, the committee met on June 13th. It was another marathon meeting. We received an update about the River Falls eSchool. We also approved the first reading of a revised board policy 361.2 related to the selection of library media center materials. We have staff people who have worked really hard on that. We also approved the first reading of revised school board policy 871 related to complaints about instructional materials or library resource materials. We discussed the rule that matched 871. We also talked, which has to do with the procedures for library media resources, if there would be a complaint, how we will manage that, as well as the exhibit. There were 2 discussions that the committee was not yet ready to approve, and the first one was the first reading of a revised policy related to student dress code. There were some questions about exactly clarity on the dress code, and then the committee also decided to not approve the student handbook until there were some revisions. So we're going to, let's take the top 2, and then we'll go to the third one. At this point, is there a motion to approve the first reading of revised school board policy 361.2 related to the selection of library media center materials, as well as approving the first reading of revised school board policy 871 regarding complaints for instructional library resource materials? Is there a motion?
Stacy, does that go with the one below that too?
Yes, but let's do that separate. Let's do that one next. We might make a change.
I'll move the 2 that you suggested.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Todd. Questions or comments? We've just discussed these a lot.
So, in response to the question that was brought up earlier,
That's the next one.
I'm sorry.
We'll just hold off until we get to the rule.
Okay.
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. I would like to suggest that if we go to 871, the rule, we do want to make sure that our board policies are as clear as possible. So if you turn to number 7, what if we were to delete the first sentence and then have this instead? I'm going to read this. The district reserves the right to refuse further reconsideration requests when it has dealt with a challenge to items on the same topic within 5 years, comma, at the discretion of the superintendent and chair of the Educational Program Committee, which allows for some more flexibility, and that would be stated directly in the rule itself. I think that this addresses a public comment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Mm-hmm. Yep. I'd make a motion to approve based on exactly what you just said.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, so let's,
And this is the first reading, I believe, right?
correct. So what we're going to do is we can vote on that amendment. So you've just moved and you've seconded. So let's vote on the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So the amendment stands. How about an additional amendment so that in number 4, we can add a parent to be selected by the principal? I think that that also would address community concern.
I would make that amendment selection. or
Okay.
amendment.
Second.
All right. Most amendment has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Now, let's go back and we will, is there a motion to approve the amended first reading of revised school board policy 871 rule? This regards the procedures for handling complaints about instructional and library media center materials.
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mike. Further questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah.
And now we have number 4. So we've had a lot of individual votes for this one. Is there a motion to approve the revised 871 exhibit for the reconsideration of library resources? And this is the actual form itself. So all of these fit together.
Yeah. I'll move.
Thank you, Todd. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Cindy. Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried, and now we have, those things are taken care of. All right, we are going to move on to the Personnel Committee. At this meeting, on June 13th,
Stacy.
yes,
this is completely procedural, but
Sure.
when we see it the second time, it will, the amendments are not, I mean, they're all just taken in as
they
the
won't be
actual
amendments
yeah,
anymore.
okay.
They will be the actual first reading that we approved. And so then, when it comes to us again, we will likely approve the second reading, unless we have any changes, but
Yeah,
it would be
okay.
exactly what we've just done.
Thanks.
That's a good question, Todd. All right, so what we did is we talked about a potential change to the 2022-23 school and instructional minutes. We had thought that maybe we would make a change, and administration has recommended that this is not the right time, so we received an update. We also approved and recommend that the board approve the 2023-24 school calendar. We received an update about certified staffing. We also approved revisions to the employee in handbook, as well as we talked about advanced learning grant and the leadership fellow program participants. So we received a variety of updates at that meeting. It was a good meeting that was quite efficient. And at this point, do we have a motion to approve the 2023-24 school calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried, as well as the employee handbook for 2022-23. There were some minor changes that we made at the committee that we suggested. All of those have been reflected in the revisions.
So moved.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Is there a second? Thanks, Todd. The committee really appreciated the amount of work to have a very strong handbook. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion carries.
I'm gonna abstain.
You're going to, so it's a
Yeah.
4. Yep. Thank you, Mike. Jamie, do you want to talk about the food service meal rates?
Administration is recommending a 5-cent increase in student meals for the next school year, basically a inflationary recommendation.
Point of order, I should go back. The Personnel Committee report, the attendance, I attended. 613 Personnel Committee. No, I'm not on here. I did attend. I don't know if Cindy, were you there?
Okay. No.
Last Monday.
It was just,
It
yeah.
was just you and I think it was. So that's the only thing. I'm sorry, Jamie, to interrupt. But
No problem.
yeah, so, but it's okay. Yep. No problem.
So at this point, is there a motion to approve the 2022-2023 food service meal rates? This is something that we have done on an annual basis for many years. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Todd. Questions or comments?
Yes, is
Yes.
this, is our pricing set as a break, I mean, it's set as a break even, correct?
Some years there's a profit.
Yeah.
That's not why we're in the business of serving meals to kids, certainly not from a profit standpoint, but to be transparent with the answer to your question. There are times when we have money, more money than we spend in making and serving those meals, and those dollars are kept in a separate account specific for food service needs. For example, the need for new equipment, materials, supplies. We need a new oven, a new dishwasher, new forks and spoons, or whatever. That is where that money comes from.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a negative Nelly, but I mean, we've seen a fair amount of inflation. Is this something we could adjust come November, December if we had such a, continue to have?
A lot of times, this is, any other time I've been involved in this, it's been because of the federal government requires us to price.
Yeah, in this
I've never
case-
seen it for inflationary.
In this case, to be honest, that's a good memory, Mike, and I don't want to stick to that. That was true. It's just not true in this case. That it historically had been that. See if I could explain it in a way that's understandable. The federal government provides subsidies, so whether they provide you with potatoes or bread or whatever, and they have a price tag they put on that, and they're saying the price for those meals has to be, how do I say? Those that are paying for their lunch have to pay the same amount that it would cost where the federal government is providing some of those subsidies. We've met that threshold. That's not the reason for the 5-cent increase this year. We're there on that margin. This is in anticipation of inflationary costs to the district. We have money in fund balance, food service fund balance right now to address things that I mentioned related to new equipment, materials, and supplies. To me, on one hand, a nickel doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a family of 4 and you're buying 5 meals a day and you're buying breakfast and you're buying lunch, a nickel can be more than a nickel for some families. And so I appreciate the questions and that you're not just rubber stamping it. It's a recommendation, again, that the administration is bringing forward. I want to be clear that we currently are holding a fund balance in the food service department, and it's healthy.
Okay. I didn't know there was a reserve.
It's probably $250,000. Could be between 250 and 300 in the last conversation I had with Chad. And again, you understand where those monies are used then is to backfill the need when we have to buy a new dishwasher, oven, and so on. And so it's a board's decision. You're making this 5-cent increase knowing that we have a fund balance in this area, and I can again appreciate the questions.
And my guess is that our costs will go up more than these percentages. I mean, 1.85% is not a very big increase in, our costs will go up more than.
The gas alone for the delivery is gonna eat more than that up, yeah.
There's a handout in your packet. It's on page 207. We got a thick packet here today. So you can see just the last couple of years, 2020 to 21, and then the following year it went up by a dime. And so we're trying to take a modest approach, I'm going to call it, at a nickel, as opposed to doing a more traditional 10 cent because of the fund balance is why we're proposing it at 5 in support of our families.
Yeah, my point wasn't to call into question the administration's pricing. I would just want two things. One, I didn't know that there was an actual separate fund balance or reserve balance for food service. Number two is that I didn't realize that equipment and that type of thing came out of that budget as opposed to the general budget. But my third point was that if we found ourselves in some hyperinflation, which it seems like we are, is there something that we have a provision to actually adjust this if we had to November, December, if we felt we had to?
And I would say the answer is within our fund balance, because right now, if you asked me, do you have a plan for how you're going to spend that $250,000 or $300,000 in fund balance, Benson? Are we in need of 3 new stoves and 2 new dishwashers? I'm going to say no, not at the present time. And therefore, again, we think that the modest 5-cent increase is adequate for meeting the district's needs while also trying to go light on families.
Okay.
Jimmy, the last couple of years, families haven't paid for school meals.
They have.
Changing back then next year.
Correct. During the COVID era, meals were free to all. And that's coming to an end. That is no more. You have to qualify for either free lunch or reduced lunch prices moving forward.
Good questions.
Yeah.
So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. We are going to move on. We have F, G, and H. And there-
I just would mention, in Chad's absence, Chad would typically be speaking to these issues tonight. He is being a good brother and helping his brother whose farm was hit by a tornado somewhere, I can't remember the name of the town, over near the Green Bay area. And he's helping his brother, is why Chad is not here this evening. So the F is approving a 22-23 budget. And so, frankly, it's preliminary. We'll go back and we're going to have a end of September. We're going to have an annual meeting. The electorate gets a chance to vote on a budget. Sometime shortly thereafter, you as a board then are going to, once we find out the kind of aid that we receive from the state, that's when you then are able to set the levy and so on. But right now, this is the budget that we have put together for next school year. At the 41,944 under the Fund 10 General Fund. And so that is the first action under letter F that we're asking you to approve and recognize. Of course, there's several assumptions being made at this point.
So we have then a motion to approve the 2022-23 budget. This is letter F.
I'd move to approve, Stacy.
Thank you, Todd. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Bob. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. G?
G is now just a fund balance report, basically. And so you can see at the bottom of, there's 3 pages. If you're looking at your packet, page 208, 209, and 210, they all look the same. And so they were just recreated in here for these 3 items on the agenda. But looking at the bottom of any one of those 3 pages, you'll see for this particular item, the fund balance for 21-22. At the very bottom of the page, the fund balance designation is shown there at the committed fund balance of $3,961,000. And that is where we commit. Chad literally parks those dollars in a place dedicated to show that we know that moving forward, there's going to be some commitments made, like new roofs, many times capital projects. it's a part of fund balance. It's just peeling off a section of fund balance and saying we've designated it here. To be honest, and transparent, it is it's a legal, appropriate, commonly used way of accounting, certainly, and we are audited annually. But the unassigned fund balance is, I think, what should be of most interest to the board at that 7,701,000. And so you then see on the next line, the fund balance, where we have a policy that says we would always carry between 25 and 30% of our operating budget has to stay within that 25 to 30%. And Chad's reporting to us here that at the end of this year, the fund balance that we're asking you to recognize and approve is that we will still be within that 25 to 26 range of that policy.
So that 25, 26 is the total, those two added together, 11 million roughly, 11.5.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying is.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You add those two numbers, I don't have my calculator, my phone is dead, so. So 25% seems like it's the 3.9 million and the 7.7 million combined gives us 25%. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that, I've never seen where we've split that out. Has there always been all these different classifications and reserve for encumbrance? When we talk about fund balance, is it always been that way? Because I've never seen it broken out like
I
that.
would say when we talk at the school board level about fund balance, we're typically referring to the 7,701,000.
So what's the seven?
And we don't typically talk about the 3,000,009
Right.
of
So what's
committed.
the 7,700,000, what is that as a percent of our budget?
It's about 1/6. 1/6, maybe? Total budget's 41.
41 million, so what's
Yeah.
19%?
Yeah. Okay.
So is
Did that
that,
without
just
calculator.
to be clear, that's significantly less than we've carried in the past? Is that accurate as a percent of our budget?
Well, I'm trying to play catch up now with my calculator. If I combine those two, to your
That's
first
right,
point,
that's the 25 to 26.
correct, yes.
So yes, we're lower than we've been.
Is
Yeah,
it,
it
is
is.
this
We are,
significant, I
we're-
mean, it's significantly lower than.
It's still within our board policy.
Well-
But we are lower than we,
Not if you,
than
not
what
if
you
you're,
remember,
not if, okay,
than what you
not
remember
if
in
you
the
use the
past.
7 million as your,
I think it would be
Base.
helpful to have Chad
right,
clarify that,
Okay,
in my opinion, because I think the designated piece has a lot to do with timing, right? Because fund balance is always a snapshot in time. It's that one snapshot in time at the end of the year.
right, but we generally haven't used fund balance unless of emergency for roofs and for, I mean, that hasn't been a fund balance piece.
So just to back up, when I said, I purposefully noted to say a couple things. One is,
If you add
we
those
are
two together,
audited,
it's awesome.
we are audited annually. So that's an independent audit done by an independent agency.
Does the.
And that it's a commonly used practice. What I was alluding to is the $3 million that is listed on a piece of paper as committed is how that we want to reflect where we're at with our fund balance, but we also don't want to reflect that we have so much money in fund balance that we're so flush with funds that we can not do without the support of state funds coming our way because our fund balance is running so high. And so in a legal, appropriate, audited way, quite frankly, we park $3 million on a line to say, we got plans for this, so don't hold it against us.
I remember that from June of,
There are certain fund item numbers that you can carry over. One would be a capital's fund number, and that's
Yeah.
where that money's being set aside.
okay. I remember this from June of 2020. Yeah. Okay.
so Dave, what was your recommendation?
Well, I was
just, I just talk to Chad. I can just, if I have any questions.
We could have a little tutorial on that at F&F.
Not a bad idea. Or at the finance meeting next.
So, at this point then, do we have a motion to approve the fund balance from the 2021-2022 budget?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second it.
Questions or comments? He went out to make sure that our visitors
if we'll
got their
have a-
questions answered. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll have quorum.
we'll have, I just counted two. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the motion is carried. All right, we have one more of these. H.
21-22 budget amendments. I frankly don't care for the word amendment, because if you ask me to clarify any specific amendment to a budget that is being presented, it has less to do with that. The need for us to file a document with the Department of Public Instruction, and their title on that document refers to this work as a budget amendment. It's their language. Here in this district, Chad has taught me a phrase. He likes to call it a true-up. At the end of every school year, he does a true-up on the budget. And so it's taking a look at all of the variances that have occurred within a school year. This person dropped their family health insurance, that person picked up family health insurance. We budgeted $400,000 for utilities this year, but we only spent $200,000. We planned on spending $50,000 on legal fees, but we only spent $30,000. And the list goes on and on and on and on. And at the end of the year, you do a true-up to verify where you really ended up at the end of the year. And so this budget amendment to the 21-22 year is that process. And so what you see here again is that on this document, Chad has identified, he used that word forecast. There's a number of things in truth that have yet to kind of resolve themselves. Our budget year ends in another 10 days. And so on the bottom of this page, he listed a few things that are still, some of them are still kind of moving targets. We still aren't going to know until the end of the month where we get some Medicaid revenues. There's still some things to work out within building departmental budgets. On and on. He listed a few things there, but for purposes of formal board action that needs to be filed with the state on this given date of June 20th, you're asked to approve what has been presented to you here on Chad's document.
So at this point, is there a motion to approve the 2021-2022 budget amendments?
So,
Thank you, Mike, and Cindy, I'll take you as the second. Questions or comments?
Stacy, I jumped out for some of that conversation. So I talked with Chad in the last week or so. I can't remember exactly what day it was, sometime last week, I think. And he explained to me, similar to what Jamie just said about that, hey, we budgeted this for fuel, but we were over budget there. We budgeted this for the utilities. And so I think the way he summarized it to me before we got into any detail was basically some good, some bad, but no catastrophic and nothing that was a grand savings either. And it all kind of, worked out about where he expected is the high level summary he gave me.
Yep. Chad and I, we bring Dave in on the process, and we went through a document, and Chad labeled them good things and bad things on our working document.
That's what he told, the same thing he told me.
It's just
Good and bad.
Yeah.
Sure.
When you have a $41 million budget, there's a lot of good things and bad things that go on in a given year.
And I would classify it more as better than expected or slightly worse than expected. I mean, it's not bad money or good money. It's just relative to the budget.
It's not going to be exact on a budget.
All right, any more questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the motion is carried. All right. The education program has looked at the Montessori Elementary Charter School contract, and at this point, it is before the board to approve this. It's a 5-year contract renewal. I think I'll take a motion, and then we can have any discussion.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Todd. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Cindy. Questions or comments? Nate, do you want to add any? Is there anything that you want to point out?
Yeah, I've just got 3 things to then.
Please do.
So in terms of, one thing to note is that within this new contract, traditionally when we started as a charter school, we had what was called a site council. It was an advisory council. New state laws have changed that require when you switch over to become, when you switch over and do your next contract to become a governance board. And so the difference between a site council and a governance board can have more control and more power over the school. Through the process, I worked with Jamie and Jennifer, and then our site council, which is comprised of parents and community members. And the overall, the overwhelming approach was that we want to keep things as they are. We want to create a contract that is reflective of current practices. And so that is a testament to just, I think, the traditional relationship between the school board and the governance board. So, so the document in front of you, that was the intent behind it. So in sections 1 through 5, basically transferred over language from our old contract to the new contract, so that more or less reads the same. The newest piece would be that sections, I think, 7, 8, and 9 talk about the termination process. That was never in our old contract, but it lays out better the process that if the district wants to terminate the charter or if the governance board wants to terminate the charter. Reading through those things, my opinion is that it's pretty neutral. It protects both parties. It's not weighted one way towards the other. And then mention the biggest change, it comes within our admission policies. So traditionally, starting 5 years ago, probably we had created a lottery. Within that lottery, we had all these different hats, and those hats you would prioritize in-resident students over open enrollment residents. So state law has changed, and we can no longer do that. So the new admission policy says that it doesn't matter if you're in district or out of district, you have the same chance of getting into the school. The site council is on the same page as, I think, at least as me, and I know as Jamie, is that the fact that that doesn't feel right. So we're moving forward with it, knowing that legally we have to do it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that, Jamie.
No, it's just a frustration that a local taxpayer is in a waiting list and they're in the lottery, and somebody from Baldwin or Ellsworth or whatever who's not paying local property taxes could have their name pulled out of the hat first. And it doesn't seem right, but we're not in charge of making the rules, and so we've written the language in compliance with the law with regard to how we would conduct a lottery. If you're on a waiting list, this is how our process will flow, and it's what the law says we have to do.
Yeah.
So, for example, this year, worst case scenario, we've got 7 open enrollment people on a waiting list, and so we're full in kindergarten. So if all the dice is rolled and fell the right way, you could have had 7 open enrolled students taking the places of 7 in-district folks that wanted to come to the school. Will that scenario ever play out? Probably not, but that's the kind of things that the site council, the Montessori school doesn't want to be known as, being a champion of this process, but that's what it is, and so that's what we got to do, it sounds like.
Do what you gotta do.
Yeah. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Thanks, Nate. All right, now we have the second reading of revised board policy 458 regarding wellness. We have already approved the first reading. Is there a motion to approve the second reading of revised school board policy 458?
Yep.
Thanks, Todd. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Bob. Questions or comments? We made no changes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Let's take K and L together because they're joining. It would be the second reading of revised school board policy 360.2 regarding the use of copywritten materials, as well as the rule for 360.2. So we could take that as a single motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Todd. Okay. Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Do we have any proposed items for future meeting agendas? We've identified, actually 3. The first thing came up in the discussion of the strategic plan that we need to go back and review or revise policies 110 and 111 to make sure that they are aligned to our mission, goals, and values. So that will be upcoming. Then we also talked about, Todd, you actually weren't here, but if there could be a quick tutorial about how we name and categorize the components of fund balance. So I see that F&F won't be meeting in July, so maybe you and Chad could talk if we want to do it in August or we want to put it on the full board agenda. If you could keep that in mind, that would be great. Anything else?
I don't know if we
Bob?
want to establish any formal cadence as far as report back on the status of the strategic plan to the board. Maybe we just let that float, but we could do it semi-annually, or I don't know if there's anything that we should establish as far as a cadence.
How about that when we do have our board retreat, that is actually a topic on there to talk about the
Good.
strategic plan, and we could then imagine what would be helpful
That'd be very
at that
good.
point.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? If you think of something, we can always add it. So we are going to schedule upcoming meetings. So the Board of Education retreat was scheduled for today because we have 2 people who are absent. Jamie and I will reschedule it for July sometime, and we'll keep you posted about the date. Education program will meet Monday, July 11th at 6 o'clock. There will be no meetings for F&F or personnel in the month of July unless something should come up. If something did, most likely it would go to the full board meeting anyway. The next regular board meeting will be Monday, July 18th at 6 o'clock. And to keep everybody posted, remember that we will have a joint City Council School Board meeting on Wednesday, August 10th at 5 o'clock at the high school. We are the hosts this time. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.